Tyon Grant-Foster cooked as Gonzaga dominated down low in a comfortable win over the Oklahoma Sooners.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, folks. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets that you can use all across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. Well, folks, Gonzaga rolled to a victory over the Oklahoma Sooners at the Spokane Arena on Saturday night. We're going to break down the game, some of the good things we saw, some of the not so good things we saw, and then we're going to talk about our 5 keys to victory, many of them which were crucial parts of the game on Saturday. We'll get to that, including Tyon Grant-Foster dominance on the glass for this Gonzaga team. And then we'll close out the show with a couple of mailbag questions, including discussion on whether Mario Saint-Supery should already be entering Gonzaga's starting lineup after a very strong game on Saturday. All right, let's break this thing down. A fun one for the Zags. 83-68, the final score, Gonzaga over Porter Moser and the Oklahoma Sooners. The score is not entirely reflective of how dominant of a game this was, in part because Gonzaga sort of let off the gas a little bit at the end of the game. I'm sure Mark Few was not thrilled about the final 6 or 7 minutes or so of this game. Gonzaga had a 19-point halftime lead, was up by 20 plus for most of the second half, ended up still with a comfortable 15-point victory, but makes it seem like a bit of a closer game than it was for those of us who were watching the game or those of us in attendance at the Spokane Arena, which was a rocking crowd on Saturday night. I was right in front of the Kennel Club, and boy, howdy, was it loud and fun to be around in that environment. Zags 2-0 on the season, of course, now 1-0 against the SEC. We'll have 2 other chances against SEC teams, at least this year, as they play Alabama in the first game of the Players Era Festival on November 24th. They'll also play Kentucky at the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville on December 5th. Zags also moved to being 16-6 all-time in games at the Spokane Arena, 2-0 against Oklahoma at the Spokane Arena in particular, and have in the last 4 years have beat Kentucky, Baylor, and Oklahoma at the arena. Very cool to see them not only utilizing the space, which holds about twice as many people as the Kennel, but having some fun marquee matchups there. I know folks would love to see these games at home, and I understand that, but considering Creighton is going to be in the house tomorrow, I feel like getting Oklahoma at the arena, Creighton at the Kennel is a pretty good trade-off and a pretty fantastic first second week of the college basketball season. We'll talk some good and bad, and again, we'll focus on some of the keys that we laid out before the game on Friday's show in the second segment, so we won't hit everything here in the first segment, but the first good thing to talk about in this game was Gonzaga's hounding defense. They were phenomenal on that end of the floor, and for so much of Mark Few's tenure at Gonzaga, their identity has been around their offense, in particular their high-scoring offense, whether it's dominance down low with the Drew Timmies of the world, whether it's just high-flying transition scoring teams, or just absolute buckets like Adam Morrison. So much of this team has been built on that offensive identity. And this year's team is, don't get me wrong, they're going to be great on offense, but I think their defense might be their core identity this year, and we saw that play out on Saturday night. I mean, this team held Oklahoma to under 40% from the field. They shot just 23% from 3, 6 of 26. And the stat that really, really stood out to me, Oklahoma had just 5 assists as a team in this game. Ryan Nembhard averaged double that last year, 5 assists. I mean, they scored 68 points, so it's not like, I mean, they had plenty of the scoring opportunities that didn't come off assists, but for a team that relies so much on the dribble drive, like Gonzaga was able to get their hands out there, knock passes away. I mean, Porter Moser talked about this quite a bit after the game. Like 5 assists is just not acceptable for this team. Is like, we have a bunch of unselfish players on our team, and we were not ready for Gonzaga's defense, and we were not ready to handle the pressure and the physicality that they showed up front. And that led to them not only having 5 assists, but 16 turnovers. I would imagine that the record of teams that have 3 times as many turnovers as assists is well under 5%. So like, you do not win basketball games when you do that. And that is a huge credit to Gonzaga's defense. They also had 8 steals, took advantage with lots of points in transition and scoring opportunities out of that as well. The other good thing for Gonzaga, they just dominated down low. We'll talk about rebounding a little bit more later in the show, but the points in the paint in this game was 58-20. And that almost in itself is misleading, because in the second half, Gonzaga still won the points in the paint battle, but it was 20-16. In the first half, for those of you who could do some really quick math, that means that Gonzaga had a 38-4 points in the paint advantage, 38-4 in the first half of this game. Just absolute dominant. And it wasn't even that Graham Ike and Braden Huff had great games. So Graham had 19 and 11. That's obviously a very good game, but he missed more bunnies than usual. Braden Huff had an uncharacteristically off night, 6 of 17 from the field. That is frankly quite bad for him, but I still had 13 points. He had 4 offensive rebounds, in part because of all the shots that he missed. But for Gonzaga's bigs to have mediocre games, Graham was slightly above average for him, which again is crazy. And Braden was below average for him in terms of what he's usually capable of doing. And yet Gonzaga still absolutely dominated down low in this game from start to finish. And a big part of that was Jalen Warley. Jalen Warley was incredible in this game. We're going to talk about Tyon Grant-Foster, folks. Do not worry. Tyon was exceptional in this game, but Jalen Warley had one of, if not the best, kind of quiet performance in this one. He finished the game with 13 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. He was 6 of 9 from the field. That is exceptional. And Warley did that by having 5 offensive rebounds. Gonzaga won the offensive rebound battle 18-8 in this game. 18 offensive rebounds, 16 second chance points. A lot of that was Jalen Warley. So many of his points were on tip-ins or easy offensive rebounds and then a quick putback score. Again, 6 of 9 is phenomenal for him. I don't think there's going to be a ton of games where Jalen Warley's taking 9 shots, but it worked in the flow of this game in particular because we saw Oklahoma go a little bit smaller with some of their lineups. So Warley got to play more. He was used defensively to guard the smaller guards for Oklahoma. How many true power forwards in Gonzaga's system do you remember guarding a 6-foot guard like Nigel Pack? With credit, Anton Watson could have done it, and I'm sure he did at times, but there haven't been a lot of power forwards that can do that in Gonzaga's system. Warley being used as a focal point on defense, a point of attack defender, while also cleaning up on the offensive glass. I mean, there are glue guys, and then there are Jalen Warley, and his impact on this game is hard to even fully encapsulate in this conversation. He was exceptional. Speaking of Jalen Warley, speaking of dominating, Gonzaga had a 38-8 advantage bench points in this game. Only 8 bench points for Oklahoma. Their depth wasn't particularly good in this game. Meanwhile, for Gonzaga, because they did not start Tyon Grant-Foster, they did not start Jalen Warley. They started Adam Miller and Emmanuel Inocente, and we saw again 38 bench points is phenomenal for Gonzaga. They also only had 7 turnovers, and Mark Few talked about this quite a bit after the game in a high possession game. Like, both these teams play pretty quick. And there were a ton of possessions for both teams. For Gonzaga to only have 7 turnovers is phenomenal. The not so good stuff, Gonzaga didn't shoot it all that well. 6 of 22 from 3. I didn't think they took a lot of bad shots. There were a few bad shots. There was a couple like early in the possession shots that was just like, that wasn't super necessary. We didn't need to throw that up there. But a lot of it was just shots that we expect to go down that didn't go down. Miller was 2 of 7 in this game, just not his strongest offensive performance. But again, I think maybe 1 or 2 of those weren't great shots, but for the most part, they were good looks. Ike and Huff were 0 of 2 each. Ike had one where he was almost too open, and you could tell he kind of hesitated, and it was like, he normally would make that shot in the flow of the rhythm. He just was kind of out of sorts. Venters and Mario were each 1 of 3 in this game. So a lot of good shots, just didn't make as many of them as you'd like. That was true for like Huff and Ike even around the rim too. So this could have been a much, much more dominant win had a few bunnies and easy shots fallen. Zags, speaking of ways this game could have been a bigger margin, Gonzaga was also only 5 of 11 from the free throw line. My bold prediction, I feel fairly good about some of my bold predictions, but my bold prediction that Gonzaga would lead the country in free throw percentage so far doesn't look very good. And part of it in this game was that the guys who got to the free throw line are just not Gonzaga's strongest free throw shooters. Gonzaga's one of their best free throw shooters is Graham Ike. He got to the line just once. He was 1 of 1, but that was the only free throw attempt he took. Meanwhile, Grant-Foster went 1 of 3. Mario went 1 of 3. Huff and Warley each went 1 of 2. And that's it. 11 free throw attempts is not as many as you'd like for a game that was this physical, but part of it is because Gonzaga just flat out dominated and got rebounds, got offensive boards, and just went up and scored. And Oklahoma was so pushed around that they weren't even able to get fouls up there. I think they let a lot go, which I think was an advantage for Gonzaga on both sides of the ball. I am fine with this not being a game that was officiated super closely, but certainly for Gonzaga, they're going to want to shoot better than, less than 50% from the free throw line going forward. Other not so good things, there wasn't a lot to complain about in this game. Steele Venters didn't play great, but it wasn't even that he played bad. He just didn't make a huge impact in this game. Played about 12 minutes, had 3 points on 1 of 3 shooting. That was about it. Again, Steele Venters is on this team to shoot threes and make threes. 1 of 3 is certainly not awful. It's 33%. You want him to shoot 40 plus, but it's 1 of 3. It's 1 of 3. Like it's just not that big of a deal. And I didn't think he looked, overmatched or struggled defensively or anything. He just got a couple of opportunities to take outside shots, knocked one of them down, didn't knock the other ones down. If that's what we're complaining about, that means it's a pretty darn good basketball game for Gonzaga. And then Graham Ike got a technical foul. It was a pretty soft tee. I was right under the basket when that one happened. He basically just signaled and one after making the shot, and the ref teed him up for that. I didn't think that it was really worthy of a tee, but they are more strict on that. And Graham has his reputation, whether deserved or not. It ended up resulting in him fouling out of the game, I think later after that. But again, I there are times to complain about Graham Ike's attitude, not attitude, but just how expressive he is on the floor. Let's put it that way. I didn't think this was that big of a deal. I didn't think this merited a technical foul, but it's worth talking about because Graham is like barreling towards Gonzaga's record. He may already have Gonzaga's record for technical fouls for a player. I certainly don't remember anybody picking up quite as many as he does. Well, folks, one of the biggest keys to this game that we laid out on Friday's show, including letting Tyon Grant-Foster cook, and cook he did. We're going to talk about that and a few other keys coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, the holiday season is right around the corner, and that means it's time to get your home ready. Whether you need more seating for guests, cozy new linens, or fun serveware for holiday hosting, Wayfair's Black Friday sale is here to help make your space shine. And the best part, you don't have to wait. Wayfair's Black Friday deals are happening all month long with over 70% off everything from sofas to spatulas. I can't believe how fast everything ships just in time for those holidays. And browsing through their site, it's easy to find pieces that actually fit my family's style. Nothing generic, just quality designs that feel very personal. And if you've ever hosted family for the holidays, you know how much a difference a few new touches can make. Wayfair makes that super easy. So folks, do not miss out on their early Black Friday deals. Head to wayfair.com now or shop Wayfair's Black Friday sale for up to 70% off. That's wayfair.com. Sale ends December 7th. Today's episode is also brought to you by Doer, folks. I've always had issues finding jeans that are actually comfortable enough for me to wear, which is why I'm so excited to get my new pair from Doer. This local company has the most comfortable jeans, no matter what style you like, and for any occasion, whether it's just a quick trip out to the grocery store, a night out with friends, a trip to the kennel or the Spokane Arena. Doer jeans have 5 times the stretch of traditional denim, and they're antibacterial, meaning your jeans stay fresh longer so you can wear them more and wash less. Doer is also made with Cool Max that regulates your body temperature and wicks moisture to keep you cool and comfortable as the temperatures change. Doer are pioneers of blending technical innovation with everyday clothing. In fact, they invented the original performance denim. Simply put, Doer makes the world's most comfortable pants without having to sacrifice style. So get a pair for yourself or as an amazing holiday gift. Go now to shopdoer.com/LockedOnSeattle and you'll get 15% off your first order. That's shopdoer.com/LockedOnSeattle for 15% off. Shopdoer.com/LockedOnSeattle. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're still recapping a very fun 15-point win for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs over the Oklahoma Sooners on Saturday night at the Spokane Arena. We talked about some of the good stuff and the not so good stuff we saw in Gonzaga's season opener in their first game against a power conference opponent. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take the 5 keys to victory that I laid out on Friday's episode of Locked On Zags, and we're going to take a look at how much those had an impact on this game. And I will admit that many times I'll have a key or a couple of keys that just didn't end up being all that impactful. But in this game, it kind of felt like a lot of the major points in terms of what happened on the floor did end up getting discussed in this segment on Friday. Number one was for Gonzaga to lock down the perimeter. Coming into this game, Nigel Pack, career 40% three-point shooter across 5 seasons. Xavier Brown, a career 37% three-point shooter on a very high volume. They had a guy coming off the bench, Dalton Forsyth, 44% shooter. Lots of good outside shooting, and Gonzaga did a great job of limiting them and forcing them into tough shots, not very good looks. They also just missed some shots that I think they would normally make. But overall, Oklahoma shot 6 of 26 from 3. 23% from distance, missed 23 pointers. Pack was 2 of 9. Jeff Nwanko coming off the bench was 0 of 4. Tay Davis, power forward from transfer from Notre Dame, he was 0 of 3 in this game. They really struggled. Xavier Brown was good. He was 2 of 4, but that was about it for them on this team. I mean, again, outside of him, that means the rest of the team was 4 of 22 from 3. Just really, really struggled, and a huge credit to Gonzaga's perimeter defense. I'll mention this here, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier. One of the things I absolutely loved that Mark Few did in this game was, instead of playing Braden Smith and Adam Miller and Mario and the smaller guards on their smaller guards, which is typically what you see, you line up the point guard with the point guard, shooting guard with the shooting guard, whatever. Gonzaga had lineups that had Emmanuel Inocente guarding Nigel Pack and Jalen Warley guarding Xavier Brown. Xavier Brown 6'2", Jalen Warley 6'7", Nigel Pack 6 foot, Emmanuel Inocente 6'5". Gonzaga had this huge advantage in terms of length and physicality on the perimeter. And of course, Oklahoma attempted to get them in screens and switch, but those two guys are so good at navigating screens and fighting through them that they really just, it completely stymied Oklahoma's offense. They couldn't get good looks. They couldn't get good shots. They want to drive and kick out, and they weren't able to do that on Gonzaga's length on the perimeter. Meanwhile, in these lineups, like I think Mario was on the floor at the same time, and they threw Mario to guard like Darion Reed or the other small forward who wasn't as much of an offensive threat. And again, if Oklahoma, maybe they could have tried to post up Mario and get an advantage that way, but they weren't really able to do so. And it was just a shrewd, smart coaching decision, and one we're going to see. Gonzaga's defensive versatility, their ability to have their wings, or in Warley's case, their power forwards, defend out on the perimeter, just makes them so difficult and such a challenge for opposing offenses to get into their rhythm. And again, Coach Moser talked about this after the game. Like, we got thrown off of our game and weren't able to play the kind of game that we wanted to play because of Gonzaga's defense. If they keep doing that, they're going to win a lot of basketball games this year. Key number 2, and this was probably the most immediately impactful key in this game. Oklahoma's front court depth was a question coming into the game, and Mo Wagee, their starting center, is foul prone. If Gonzaga was able to get him in early foul trouble, it felt like a very obvious key to a victory. And that is exactly what happened. And it was the thing Moser talked about the most after the game. He said the worst case scenario for us was Mo Wagee picking up 2 early fouls. He had 2 fouls, folks, at the 16:44 mark. The first media timeout had not happened, and Mo Wagee already had 2 fouls. For the record, he picked up his first foul at 16:52. And then 8 seconds later in game time, 6 seconds later, 8 seconds, I knew math. 8 seconds later in game time, he picked up his second foul, had to go to the bench. For Oklahoma, we had talked before the game that we didn't think Kai Rogers, their true freshman, was going to play. He did not play in their first game. He did end up playing in this game. It was his college debut. And he came into the game, 6'10", 4-star freshman, like a highly regarded high school prospect coming into this game. He came into the game. Gonzaga immediately ran a play to get Graham Ike the ball on the block, and Graham Ike went over his right shoulder like he does with his left hand and just absolutely bodied Kai Rogers right out of the way and got an easy lay. And it was the perfect welcome to college basketball moment for Rogers. Like, oh, this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a dude who's 5 years older than you, who's an All-American candidate, who moved you as if you were still in high school, even though you're a 6'10" college freshman. And again, Moser after the game said, I need to do a better job of getting my bigs and my young players more ready for this game. And again, I don't know how you can get more ready than playing college basketball than having to guard Graham Ike on your first possession. But Gonzaga's ability to get Mo Wagee, really Ike's ability to get Mo Wagee in foul trouble, had a massive role in this game. Oklahoma ended up going small, and then that's how you get Gonzaga's massive 18 offensive rebounds. And basically Gonzaga's dominance on the glass was directly a result of Mo Wagee's foul trouble. And that was the third key, was dominate on the glass. And dominate on the glass Gonzaga did. I've said this a few times about other things. The final score wasn't quite indicative of the dominance of the game. I'll tell you this. Gonzaga's rebounding advantage does not tell the full story here, because the overall rebounding advantage was 46-39. But it felt like Gonzaga absolutely dominated down low. And a lot of those rebounds came towards the end of the game for Oklahoma. Gonzaga ended up with an 18-8 advantage in offensive rebounds. Tyon Grant-Foster and Jalen Warley, who both came off the bench, combined for 9 offensive rebounds. 2 of Gonzaga's bench wings had more offensive rebounds than all of Oklahoma in this game. Braden Huff also had 4. Granted, like we said, he was 6 of 17, so some of them were just him cleaning up his own messes. There was a couple possessions where Grant-Foster got multiple offensive rebounds as well, but this team was just was so much more physical and so much more just commanding with their presence down around the rim that they just completely took Oklahoma out of this game with how dominant they were down low. And again, Moser talks about this, and for Oklahoma, like, they're going to see teams that are tough and physical and strong in the SEC. I think Gonzaga's front court compares to any good team in the SEC and is better than the vast majority of them. But if Oklahoma is going to get this bodied by Gonzaga's front court, they're going to be in a world of pain in the SEC. They're going to have to get tougher and stronger fast. Meanwhile, Gonzaga looks like a team that's going to be able to do this to a whole heck of a lot of teams that they end up playing this year. Key number 4 was that this game is going to be a bit of a trial by fire for Gonzaga's point guards. This was far and away the toughest matchup that Gonzaga's guards were going to face in the early part of the season. 2 exhibition games were non-D1 teams. Texas Southern was, a 300th ranked team in KenPom. And this game was Nigel Pax, Xavier Brown, Dalton Forsythe. Like, this was a team that was pretty clearly going to be a challenge for Gonzaga's point guards. And I think they met the challenge. But I think a big part of this is the fact that Mario not only outplayed Braden Smith, he doubled him up in minutes. Braden Smith started in this game, but he played 13 minutes. Mario came off the bench and played 26 minutes. That's a big difference. That's a big difference. And Mark Few said before the game or before the season, like, hey, Mario's going to push Braden Smith for playing time. That's pretty clearly already happening. And the thing is, Braden Smith didn't play bad in this game. I saw people bring this up on Twitter. I had people responding to me and like, hey, like, what happened with Braden Smith? Like, did he get hurt? Like, why didn't he play much in the second half? It's like, Mario was just playing better. And I think the fact that Mario was playing better on a day where Smith wasn't playing bad is a pretty darn good sign for Gonzaga. You got to feel good about that. And Mario, 26 minutes, he had 8 points, 6 assists, 4 boards, 3 steals, and a block. Just filled up the stat sheet in this one. 2 of 4 on his 2-point attempts, 1 of 3 from 3, 1 of 3 from the free throw line. Very active on both ends. I thought his defense was exceptional in this game. It's not something that we're expecting him to be a big contributor in right away because he was still adjusting to college rules, college officiating, and that still happened. He still had 3 fouls. He still was in disbelief about some of the fouls called on him, but he looked really good on both ends of the floor, had that incredible alley-oop to Tyon Grant-Foster. Just an excellent game from Mario. But again, Smith was fine. He only had 2 points, but he's 1 of 2 on 2-point attempts, 0 of 1 from 3, 3 assists and a steal, only 1 turnover. I thought he played fine. I thought he played fine in a 13-minute per game role. He's just, it's a bit of an anomaly that he only played 13 minutes. And certainly something to monitor for Gonzaga going forward, especially in that game against Creighton on Tuesday, who has a great backcourt as well. Where does that playing time go? Does Mario still play that much more than Braden? We'll get to that a little bit in the third segment. And then key number 5, let Tyon cook. Folks, Tyon cooked. 14.7 rebounds. He had an assist and a steal. He was 6 of 11 from the field, but he was a one-man highlight reel. If you were to watch the best highlights of this basketball game, it could be filled up entirely of things that Tyon Grant-Foster did. He had a ridiculous blocked a shot off the rim or off the backboard. Same possession, out in transition, got himself a pass on the baseline, took 2 dribbles to his left and dunked it home on the same possession. Place just went absolutely nuts after that. Later, he had an alley-oop dunk from Mario Saint-Supery. He talked about that after the game, that he and Mario had been practicing that. And then he kept telling Mario, like, just throw it up there, dude. Like, I will get it. I can get that ball. And then during the game, he saw the way that they handled defense on a certain play and said, hey, when we run that again, I'm going to cut. You get that ball up in the air, and I'm going to throw it down. And he did. And that's the fact that Tyon and Mario in particular are able to have that kind of rapport and have that kind of connection and be able to make a play happen impromptu in the middle of a game is incredibly promising for Gonzaga. These are the 2 guys who spent the least amount of time in this offense, in this system up to this point, and they're just making plays happen on the fly. Incredible stuff. Grant-Foster also had another dunk, a tip dunk. He had I think 4 dunks in this game because he had 5 offensive rebounds. He was an absolute menace. This might be one of the deepest Gonzaga teams of all time. We've talked about that a few times already, and we're going to talk about that more in the final segment of the show. But Grant-Foster may need to play 25-plus minutes. He played 22 in this one. He had 14 points. He's been Gonzaga's first or second leading scorer in both of their first two games. He played exceptional. Yeah, he had 3 turnovers. He's 1 of 3 from the free throw line. Whatever. I'm not overly concerned about those things. Obviously, the turnovers will need to tighten up, but considering how little time he spent with this team up to this point, that performance was incredible. He also is he loves engaging with the crowd. I haven't seen a player who is as animated about pumping up the crowd as he is. He had one possession where he high-fived a bunch of people in the crowd because he happened to fall towards the sideline when the play was whistled dead. Like, he is such you could just tell he's so happy to be here. And how could you blame him for being happy to be here considering what his offseason was like? The Zags are going to need to play him, and they're going to need to play him a lot. And he is a massive X factor for this team and raises their ceiling in a significant way. And the fact that he's this good already should be terrifying for the Kentuckys and the Oregons and the Alabamas of the world and everybody in the SEC or in the WCC shaking in their boots, knowing what this team looks like with Tyon Grant-Foster 2 games into the season. Well, folks, Mario certainly made an impression in this game. We talked about that already, but is it enough for him to enter the starting lineup over Braden Smith? We're going to talk about that and a few other mailbag questions to close out the show coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, the NBA is back, and so is college basketball. But, folks, there's no better place to get in on all of that action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or if you want to ride out the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Odds for the WCC regular season title, Gonzaga's last chance to capture a championship. They are at minus 185 right now to win the regular season. If you don't think it's going to be Gonzaga for whatever reason, St. Mary's is next at plus 360. San Francisco, the dark horse, at plus 600. And right now, folks, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. We're closing out the show with a trio of mailbag questions submitted over the weekend. First question here comes from KW Sess on Twitter, who says, should Mario start now and remain the starter for the season? All right, so should or will, I suppose, are different questions. Will Mario start going forward? No. I would be very, very surprised to see Mark Few make this early of a starting lineup change to the point guard position, especially with Braden Smith playing fine. Like, if Braden Smith had played poorly or had been playing poorly previously to this, and I don't think Braden Smith has played his best basketball. I do think that's a reasonable thing. On a team where we've seen so many players who are already seemingly in midseason form, Braden Smith hasn't been that guy yet. I think that is a completely fair assessment. I also think for the most part, Mario hasn't been that guy yet either. He just happened to look better in the game against Oklahoma. And that's a huge game, an important, crucial game. And to Mark Few's credit, when he realized that Mario was playing better, he rolled with him. I mean, he played twice as many minutes. I would, if you had told me that in the second game of the season, Mario was going to double up Braden Smith in minutes, I would have never believed you. And so huge credit to Coach Few for being willing to do that. But I don't think that this will result in a starting lineup change this early. And that's the key. Because I don't think that it means that it won't happen at all. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it does happen. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it happens by December, maybe even by late November. But I don't think it's going to happen yet. I think it's a little too early for that. And again, should and will are different questions. I think there's an argument to say that, yeah, it should happen. Mario is a better player. And I think that Mario's overall talent level is better than Braden Smith's. His upside, significantly better than Braden Smith's. And his performance right now might be on par or better than Braden Smith's. But Smith has much more experience in the system. Having been a redshirt last year, he's got more experience in college basketball, more understanding of the rules in college basketball specifically. And I think that his floor is a little bit higher than Mario's, where Mario could have games where he has significant foul trouble and just is really struggling, whereas I think Smith's a little bit steadier. I will reiterate. Mario is a more talented basketball player. I believe that. And I believe he is a better fit for Gonzaga than Braden Smith, but I think they're both very good. And Mark Few is incredibly resistant to making early season starting lineup changes. They did it last year with Michael Ajayi and Ben Gregg. It didn't really go very well. And I think that he's going to be hesitant to make a change, particularly in front of the Creighton game. Again, if overwhelming evidence comes forward that Mario just deserves to play over Braden Smith, then I think the change will happen. And I wouldn't be shocked if that does happen. But right now, while Mario was better on Saturday, again, it wasn't that Smith was bad. And I don't think Smith has done anything to lose his starting job. And Mario hasn't quite overwhelmingly done enough to take his job yet. Question number 2 comes from Brandon via Gmail. Brandon says, with the Zags being so deep this year, I was curious how many players on this roster could be starting for a Power 4 team. A Power 4 team is quite vague. If we're talking Boston College or Seton Hall, who I believe are the two lowest, and Big East, it's Power 5. The Big East is a power conference team. If we're counting Boston College, Seton Hall, teams like that, probably 9 or 10 guys, like legitimately 9 or 10 players on this team could start for certain power conference teams. Graham EK, Braden Huff, Tyon Grant-Foster, Adam Miller start for basically everybody. Like those guys are starters for the vast majority of power conference teams. Jalen Warley, Steel Ventures, Emmanuel and Achente start for quite a few teams. And Achente a little bit different. I think he's such a good fit for Gonzaga and what they do specifically, but I think a lot of teams would not start him because they don't have the offensive firepower around him. So he's a bit of an odd case. Warley's a little bit of an odd case as well, but Warley, Ventures, and Achente would start for a good chunk of power conference teams. Warley probably more than anybody else. Venters next most, and Achente next most. Smith and Mario would start for probably half power conference teams. Smith, we'll see. Mario's got a lot of upside, and I think that even some not so good power conference teams would start him just because the talent is so tantalizing. Smith, I think, is maybe a little less than half the power conference teams, but that's still a pretty incredible amount of teams. Maybe it's more like 30-ish% of power conference teams he starts for. After that, you get honestly, there's teams that Davis Vogel could start for, and he's not even in Gonzaga's rotation. He didn't even play on Saturday against Oklahoma, and yet there are teams out there that would start Davis Vogel, and I think even some power conference teams that would do so. Diani's probably not there. There are other college basketball teams certainly that Diani would start on, but I think power conference teams, probably not many, if any, at this point, just because of how raw he is. But that still means there's 9 or 10 guys that you could conceivably make an argument would start for more than a few power conference teams. And that is incredible based on Gonzaga's depth for this year. Final question of the show. This one comes from Robert at Seattleite206 on Twitter, who says, with the addition of Denver, do you think Omaha would be a next likely candidate for WCC expansion? The Mavs would be a reasonable travel partner and offer opportunities to play non-con games at Creighton for sponsored sports. Yeah, I don't think that that's the direction the WCC is looking. I think the WCC is looking to poach from the Big West first. I think they're looking at UC Santa Barbara. I think they're looking at UC Irvine. I think they're looking at schools like that, maybe try to get Cal Baptist, who just moved into the Big West, or other school, maybe even like a Utah Valley, programs like that. I think that they want to keep this thing pretty close to the West Coast. Denver, I feel like, is more of an exception than like a start of a trend. But I also don't think Omaha would be a terrible addition. I think it makes some sense. And I think if they strike out on the Big West schools, or if they just feel like, hey, like the opportunity to add a school like this is maybe we can get Omaha at a smaller price, maybe that makes some sense for them, because it does, like, all your arguments make sense. It does make sense as a travel partner for Denver. Omaha, Nebraska, it's a decent, media market for them to be in. It's just not on the West Coast, but it is a decent media market. The school has 15,000 students. It's got a $1.9 billion endowment. It's looks a lot like Denver in a lot of ways. Last year, they were pretty good at men's basketball. They haven't really been good prior to that. They're not really very good this year so far. They're 0-2. So I think it's probably somewhere on the list for Stu Jackson, the WCC, but I think there's quite a few other schools in front of it, mostly because of geography. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Thank you so much to those of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Of course, a special shout out to those everyday listeners as well. I'll be back on Tuesday with a big old preview for Gonzaga's game that night against the Creighton Blue Jays at the McCarthy Athletic Center. That's going to be a phenomenal basketball game. We'll have a big time preview for that one on Tuesday. And of course, we'll recap it afterwards, and then we'll start getting you ready for Gonzaga's next game coming up just a few days after that against Arizona State. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.